The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
Listeners of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, I bring to you the pre-order for the 2018 Matt Talk Online NCAA Division I Fan Guide, the digital preview guide that's over 200 pages of facts, stats, results. If there is a result that happened in NCAA wrestling and that wrestler is in the NCAA Division I championships coming up in Cleveland, I guarantee you that result will be in the guide. Save yourself $5 by using the offer code podcast. Go to matttalkonline.com/fanguide18. Click the I want this button. Click order now, pre-order. It'll be digitally delivered to your inbox on March 13th, maybe even a skosh earlier. Over 200 pages of facts, stats, results. I stake my reputation on the claim that this is the single greatest thing that will add to your knowledge and experience at the NCAA championships. Everything you want to know about 330 wrestlers and all the teams competing, available. matttalkonline.com/fanguide18. Use the offer code podcast. Save yourself $5. It is a short-time listener exclusive. This is the product that ESPN and all the Mad Side broadcasters use, their production truck, their broadcasters. You name it, it's in there. Facts, stats, again, I've said results, pub trivia, all-American lists. You find out all these things from the NCAA championships. I could go on for an entire show about it, but right now, I'm just going to say, matttalkonline.com/fanguide18, offer code podcast. You will not be disappointed. And welcome back again, wrestling fans, to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryan here with you with news, reviews, previews, and interviews from the notable names around the sport of wrestling. And we have a special guest today. He's going to give us some late-breaking Hawk news. The Forum legend himself, Kentucky Mudflap. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be addressing all the wrestling fans and all my followers out there. I want to first start off with saying thanks for all the kudos and laudations for my correspondence and breaking all the big stories and talking about the world's oldest and greatest sport.
Now, what throws me for a loop right away is this is not at all how I think many of us expected you to sound. You sound more of an educated man than somebody who spends a lot of time in an RV.
Well, not much on book learning, and everybody knows that. But, you know, they taught me a lot when I was in the joint. How to read and write and cipher and do all those things you need to do to be a successful businessman and the voice of wrestling.
As we talk to the man behind the flap, so to speak, and just in case you're wondering, folks, the gentleman here is not going to reveal his real name. That will still remain a mystery. We're kind of breaking the fourth wall a little bit to talk about things that have basically been a constant in the sport of wrestling for coming on 15 years at least. And let's just get right to the origins of it. When did you first start the idea behind this character, Kentucky Mudflap?
It was in the later years of Jim Zalewski's reign at the University of Iowa, and I was watching the development and over-optimism about development of wrestlers in that program, and I felt perhaps there needed to be an alternative voice of the man in the street. So that's where Kentucky Mudflap came from.
And the shtick itself, I mean, it's, Kentucky Mudflap is a moniker like Tennessee Waterfall. There's a couple of them for it, but why did that ultimately stick as the character name?
I think it was the world's oldest and greatest hairstyle. Business in front, party in back. And I kind of like the whole motif. So that's where it started. He could have been Wisconsin Waterfall or something like that, but he ended up being Kentucky Mudflap. And I think it just kind of stuck and resonated with the wrestling fandom.
And as far as the history of where you were posting, have this only been something that's been on the Matt.com forums, or have you posted anywhere else? I don't believe I've ever seen you post anywhere else other than the Matt.
No, it's the Matt.com, and it's been solely where I'd been having a dialogue with my fellow wrestling fans.
What was it? Was there any thoughts about maybe jumping over the Hawkeye Report, or was it just something that, like, you know what, it's here, it lives here, this is where it stays?
I kind of like the idea of interacting with people who are fans of other teams. I don't want to dilute the moniker or the message, and I think the Matt.com is the right place for it. I'm not sure some of the Hawkeye Report fans might appreciate some of Mudflap's more outlandish views of things either.
And how much of this, in terms of where you post, is rooted in your own personal opinion, or some of it, and how much of it is just kind of like based on your personal opinion, and it's just you amplify it to the nth degree to kind of get a rise out of people?
It all comes from my own personal opinion. I started watching wrestling in about 1975 in Iowa City and watched Dan Gable's teams wrestle at dual meets at home, Big Ten tournaments, and the Midlands tournament, and of course nationals. And over time, I really became well acquainted with the sport and became kind of a mortal database, to the point where now I'm watching movies about wrestling like Foxcatcher, and I saw Dave and Mark Schultz wrestle personally, and actually met them. So at some point or another, traveling through time, now 45 years or whatever it is, one becomes a mortal database of knowledge, and that's really kind of where all this is coming from. It's kind of coming from the heart, my own opinion, maybe amplified for to give the fans a little bit more taste of reality. Maybe one might say a little hyperbolic, just to make a point.
Some of the things with what's being said, some of them get on the lines of they might be a little risque, a little gaudy, a little blue at times. But do you think that that's just kind of part of the character, or where do you draw the line on some of these things? Because I'll be honest with you, when I was moderating a forum a couple times, I had to go and be like, all right, this is too funny to take down. I'm going to just tweak a couple words here and let it stay.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of times where some of my words had vanished or been substituted for, and oftentimes I felt maybe the editorial work was well warranted. I think one never knows where the line is until you're across it, so I think that's helpful to see that kind of feedback. I think the risque kind of characterizes a lot of people in wrestling, and their more free-thinking attitude towards life and enjoying themselves. And I think, by and large, most of the people that read Mudflap's work want to hear more about his personal life rather than less.
Do you have you conjured up a true backstory beyond? I mean, because I have to. I mean, we're talking like 15 years of posts here that I'm trying to sit there and remember when the first time I saw a Flap post and what the backstory is. So, in your mind, did the I guess figure that is Kentucky Mudflap wrestle? I mean, how much of his background is based on your background, or is it one and the same?
He came from a little bit of a disadvantaged background. He had some stepdads, or at least that's what they called themselves, that came in and visited his mom frequently, and he ran into trouble as a youth. Wasn't well educated, and ran into some trouble with the law. We spent a fair amount of time in the joint. After he got out of the joint, he got a job as an over-the-road guy, truck driver. And then ultimately, a gentleman named Harry Lewis in Iowa City took him on to his roofing crew and taught him the fine art of roofing. And that's where his business acumen came into play. After he became successful and even wealthy, he took up the world's oldest and greatest sport and ultimately became the voice of it. He lives down in between on an old farmhouse with his dog, down between Lone Tree and Columbus Junction, and runs his roofing business out of the barn. So that's kind of his backstory, or his life story. And of course, everybody knows that he's well acquainted with many of the head coaches and a number of the people on the radio and television correspondents, to the point where he's able to access the finest tickets and travel with some really very high-nosed company.
I love it. Now, when we switch back to the man behind the flap, so to speak, I mean, you talked about discovering, following wrestling in the 70s, and what was it about the sport of wrestling and Coach Gable's teams that drew you in as a wrestling fan?
I think the thing that I saw the most with Gable was his ability to inspire people to reach their potential. And it goes far beyond the Jesse Whitmer story. And there were some great wrestlers there who achieved a lot of note, but probably under different circumstances wouldn't have. And some of those people I'm talking about are Ed Blue Bannock, maybe Mike Deanna, Bruce Kinsis, people that maybe if they were in another program, regardless of then or now, would never become national champions or near national champions, or in the case of Ed and Lou Bannock, Olympic gold medal winners. One of the best memories I have, and there would be a lot of people that say they were there, but was the time that Gable came out with the big mat for Oklahoma State. He had if I recall correctly, he had a duel with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo on Friday, and in the old Iowa Fieldhouse. And Gable had closely examined the rule book and determined that while there was a minimum diameter on the wrestling mat circle, there was no maximum. So he and Gary Kurtelmeyer put together probably at least 8 mats, flipped them over, coated them, and put one giant circle in it, and filled up the Iowa Fieldhouse. We were there watching Cal Poly get destroyed by Iowa that Friday night when the Oklahoma State wrestling team walked in. At that time and even now, they were known for playing the edge of the mat, and this was a purpose for the giant mat. So they walked in and literally watched their jaws drop when they saw the spectacle. Next night, Iowa just took them apart, and of course, after that, the NCAA declared a maximum diameter on the wrestling mat size. But it was astounding what he was able to do with those kinds of psychological steps. Way beyond being a great competitor or a great coach, he's a good human being and somebody that I think everybody who's ever worked with him really looks up to.
You had alluded to in Flap Speak about all the coaches are in cahoots or they're talking to the Flap. But if you've looked at the information you've posted over the years, there's been some stuff that's been wrong, but there's also been some stuff that's been dead on accurate. Once you get through the misspellings and the I guess the audible slurring that you kind of expect to read as you go across it. So the question is how the inside information is acquired. I mean, again, I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus in that regard, but there's wrestling's a well-connected sport. I mean, there's things that you hear in Iowa City, 10 minutes from now, and I might get a text from it, 30 minutes later. I mean, we're well connected more so than ever, but even before the era of smartphones, you were posting stuff from seemingly inside the coach's mind, so to speak. So, how are you going about, acquiring this type of information that it's not a dead giveaway to who you are?
I think it's important to stay close with people that are in the wrestling community, number one, because one can find out or discover things that are so-called breaking news. Mudflap's been known to break some good stories, and as he says, he breaks all the big ones. However, I think there are also some things one can do with a significant body of knowledge about making certain predictions. Wrestling, in a lot of ways, is a sport where an astute fan can understand and make some qualitative and quantitative judgments about what may occur. And I think everybody sat next to or worked with or been around fans that could predict a winner in a certain wrestling match, where it might be an uncanny call as to not only who the winner was, but also what the score might be. So I think there's an element of resident knowledge of wrestling, and then use of inside information from certain sources that are out there and have been out there for quite some time in the wrestling community.
Now, as we move forward, I actually kind of want to go backwards when we're moving forward and talk about other shticks that have gone on to the Mat.com for years. Of course, one of the ones I remember early was Skandar Akbar, a playoff, of course, the old professional wrestling name, and then DF and Delfino has had his his shtick for quite a while. I mean, when you see other people that have their form personas, so to speak, I mean, how often do you read those guys, and who are some of your favorite folks to read, whether they be a persona or just a general poster?
I think Skandar was hilarious, and I'm quite disturbed that he disappeared. I don't think I've seen him for maybe 8 or 10 years. It might just be that I missed his work. I think there are some other personalities that are on there that may not be a persona, but still are people that have a certain affect or personality, like say Willie Boy or some of the other folks. I think if one can get past people who like to throw rocks at each other and attempt to bully each other, really want to exchange information or opinions, it's really a nice forum and a way to discover things or learn from one's fellow fans. I think that's one of the really good parts of those kinds of media for interaction.
What other boards are you reading regularly?
I like to read all the boards for any of the teams that are showing some development or action in their wrestling program. Right now I'm watching the Cyclone board, which has historically been reasonably inactive because of the lack of success they've had in their program. But it's clear that Kevin Stresser's got something going, even if he might bruise or cause a few bumps or injuries along the way. He's going to get that program running. Obviously Penn State, Ohio State, some of the other programs that are out there that are emerging, like NC State. I like to follow those programs and watch the success of wrestling coaches. Particularly, it's interesting when one watches coaches that are developing programs in areas that haven't historically been successful, like NC State, as I said earlier. It's fun to watch the sport grow, and it's fun to see people get involved and interested in it.
Throughout the course of this interview, we'll be throwing out some listener questions that we've gotten from Twitter. The first one I'm going to start out with in regards to Mudflap. It's from a gentleman who calls himself Norbert Durango. Is the shtick forced now more than it was in the past, or is it still something that you feel is genuine?
I think it's authentic. One looks back at the history, going back to I think 2001. The grammar and syntax and viewpoint has been essentially very similar, even down to the story of his mother when he got out of the joint right on Christmas Eve and went to visit her. So, and I think everybody was touched by that Christmas homecoming story.
All right, and I'm also going to interject.
So I would say it's very similar.
I'm going to interject that considering the Twitter personality, I actually know who this person is. And yeah, your name is not Norbert Durango, so pot, meet, kettle. Moving forward, there's some things about the genesis of this. Do you remember the very first post you put on the Mat.com and what its context was?
In general, I do. At the time, it was during the decline of the Zaleski regime, and a lot of fans were being very over-optimistic about development of certain wrestlers on the team. And I thought at the time, what better way to show this over-optimism than by having someone who was virtually uneducated come on and join them in their predictions of people who were 500 wrestlers becoming national champs the following year. So that was the origin. Wanted Mudflap to be antithetical to everybody's viewpoint, to demonstrate to them that it was unlikely that their favoritism was going to be fulfilled in the actual outcomes. I can't remember the exact first post, but pretty close.
Do you think the shtick, as it comes across in terms of being uneducated and then being an Iowa fan, do you think that can be viewed negatively against your favorite Hawkeyes? I mean, it kind of plays to a negative stereotype of rednecks in Iowa.
Yeah, I think that certainly could be viewed negatively. I think at the same time, we've all seen a Mudflap or two out there fervently endorsing their team and find them to be somewhat interesting. Of course, many times people spot him at events, so there must be people out there who resemble him. So, yeah, I agree. It's not the best representation of the program, but I think it still belongs someplace in the as a page in the book somewhere.
Also, want to make it abundantly clear, my hometown is also known for its creative business in the front, party in the back hairstyles. So I'm not saying that as a shot by any means to our wrestling fans at the state of Iowa. I come from such an area, so I can relate. Now, Mr. Footsweep, Steve Borgia asking, who was your English teacher?
I think it was a volunteer at Anamosa State Penitentiary.
By volunteer, do you mean cellmate?
Could well be, yeah. Yep.
Now, another question. What is your favored, I guess, flavor of truth serum?
Captain Morgan and Coke is the best truth serum there is. There's people who follow Mudflap know beer just don't cut it no more. And, at some point you got to get up to the hard stuff. Yeah, Morgan and Coke for sure.
Well, what about the advent? I mean, Iowa's got some great craft breweries that are bringing out some pretty heavy, high alcohol content beers. Has the Flap jaunted into the world of like the double IPA that's 10% that's like sucking on a pine cone?
I think he's more of a PBR and natural light kind of guy.
Well, I'd always say Busch too, because I know Busch Light's also a huge thing for college kids in the state of Iowa.
There you go.
And I'm actually going to give Brett Hass and Leighton Gall the credit on that one, because my first real experience with wrestling people in Busch Light was with those two. So we'll leave that story for another time, because I'm not the one on the clock here. Now, we got a couple of them from @rhenry, a.k.a. Chief Stormsky, on Twitter. And a lot of these were actually going to be in my line of questioning. But since he asked them so eloquently, we're going to go kind of rapid fire here. What was your favorite roofing job and why?
I think it was the tear-off job in Chicago where Mudflap came in with his crew, and he was bothered by a local union steward and had to show his enthusiasm for concealed carry to change his tune about shutting him down. Probably the best one. There've been some other ones when he was down working for FEMA down after Hurricane Katrina and roofing all those shacks that weren't even worthy of being a hog house back in Iowa, which was what he represented. So those are two good examples of his business philosophy and the kind of niche markets he likes to pursue.
Who's the Hawkeye that you'd most like to wrestle?
Oh, that's a good question. The current Hawkeye?
Any Hawkeye of all time.
Any Hawkeye ever. I think Mike Deanna might have been the best wrestler in terms of agility and speed. I still remember the time in his senior year when he wrestled Mark Torella and beat him for the Big Ten title. And unfortunately, then he lost in NCAAs. But probably the greatest Hawk never to win a national title, I would say.
Of your sons, known or illegitimate, if they had to wrestle anywhere other than Iowa City, where would it be?
I think UT Chattanooga would be a good choice for them. Mudflap's shown some enthusiasm periodically for UT Chattanooga. I think that would be a good spot. NC State would be a good place for them. I think those would be good choices. Alternately, one might want to choose a place with a little less pressure. And, Mudflap's remarked on some of the programs out there that don't appear to have much enthusiasm for the wrestling team. So maybe that would be where he'd want them to go.
And where will your RV be parked at Nationals?
I think it's going to be parked in the handicap area for sure, don't you think? Mudflap probably gain a spurious handicap sticker and hang it from the front of it and pull up and take 3 or 4 handicap spots. What do you think?
I'm pretty sure that's also a borrowed handicap sticker.
I would say, unless alcoholism is a disability now.
I don't know what comedian Mitch Hedberg said. It was the only disease you can get yelled at for, and it's like, damn it, Flap, you're an alcoholic. Damn it, Flap, you have lupus. That one of those does not sound right. And again, I'm quoting Mitch Hedberg on that. That's not my words. That's his. So now
there you go.
Other things that have come out of this, and I have been asked for years when I took over the message board moderation from 2009 to 2012 at usawrestlingforthemat.com. I had access to a lot of the registration data, and under the old forum format, there really wasn't a whole lot there. And then the new forum came over, and you were one of the people that actually came over. We lost a couple of the trollish personalities that didn't have the oomph and imagination as one Flap did. I know Susie Shagwell was one of the casualties. May she rest in peace. But when it comes back and I start looking to see, it's like, do I know any of these people? Because it's been one of these questions that I'd had for years. And after a while, I was like, well, when we ported all the names over and all the email addresses, there was no identifiable information. Like now you register, you've got to at least put a name in there. Back then it was email basically, and that was it. So I drew a blank right away. I'm like, okay, who are these people? And I couldn't tell. So 2012 comes along, and I remember writing a preview for the Olympics, and it was a women's wrestling preview, and I think I had written something about Clarissa Chun and being a 2-time Olympian, and somebody sent an email to me from Kentucky Mudflap at gmail.com, basically telling me I was wrong, and it was Bonnie Blair who was in speech, and it was so I'm sitting there trying to argue with somebody who I assume is the person known as Kentucky Mudflap, only to find out that then I get MF'd on the reply, and I'm like, okay, you want to play that way? I go to the forum, and I banned Kentucky Mudflap from the forum, and I had only banned 10 people ever in the 3.5 years I was there. Couple months later, I get an email from this gentleman I'm talking to right now, the real Flap, and it says, okay, you did not send me an email that from Kentucky Mudflap at gmail.com. Your response was?
Well, I'm operating off memory here, but I think I said I would never insult you if I'm correct. What's your recollection of that?
Yes, it was right along those lines. Like, nope, I would not insult you. I think it was something about how you like my work, but that's just me patting myself on the back. So I said, okay, I need to know what the email address was associated with the account. And then you threw it at me. I was like, okay, so somebody tried to spoof the Flap to get banned. Think about that for a second. Somebody goes out of their way because they don't like what you're saying so much to curse me through email so it would ban you on the forums. That's got to be kind of this interesting place that you hold in the sport of wrestling.
Mudflap has a way of inflaming emotions in some way or another. It's fun to go to wrestling meets and tournaments and listen to people speculate about who it might be, or have people adamantly say they went to the Matt.com posters party at the local strip joint or know who he is. So it's a fun endeavor, and it's a nice way to interact with my fellow fans for sure.
Now, there is one thing. You mentioned the posters party. I almost fell victim to one of these one time. It was a Skandar Akbar post, and I was like, oh, cool. That'd be cool to hang out with some of these people. And then somebody had followed up and replied like, yeah, nice try. And it was a link to, it wasn't even Google Maps. It was like a MapQuest link, and it was a strip club. And I'm like, Man, I'm glad I didn't do that. So I almost bit hook, line, and sinker for one of those things. And I'm not afraid to admit it. Now, another person that kind of gets incensed is Andy Hamilton has told me a story that when Tom Brands got the job back at Iowa, they were trying like mad to figure out who Mudflap was. I mean, there were phone calls calling people like, hey, is it you? Is it you? Is it you? What is the best theory that someone has told you personally that, yeah, I know Mudflap is, insert name here?
I think it was John Irving, the graduate of the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, who wrote The World According to Carr.
Somebody tried to convince you it was John Irving.
Yep.
Who I've also had on this program before, which is pretty interesting. But so other names that have been thrown out, and a lot of these you've probably heard before too. Royce Alger is often looked at as somebody, but Royce doesn't, he doesn't speak quite flappish. Lee Weber has been thrown out there a couple times. Randy Lewis, Eric Juergens, just to name a few. Some even thought it was Zaleski at a point. So what are some other names that you've heard thrown out there outside? I mean, John Irving's a pretty impressive one, and it takes a pretty good imagination to come up with that stuff. So I wouldn't put it past that type of mind. But what are some of the better theories too that you've heard that you just kind of get a chuckle out of?
I thought Scott Morningstar was a fun name that was thrown about a little bit. I also heard Mark Perry, and I thought about it. And I thought, well, Mark's 32, so he would have been about 15 when he been living in Stillwater when he started doing it. But more power to him. I think it changes. I think Mike Zadek was one that they'd indicated might be Mudflap one time or another. So I guess the mystery will continue until Mudflap passes away, whenever that is.
What's also interesting about Mike Zadek is when he was telling me a story at the Virginia Duels this year that when he was living in Montana, he wasn't in a very big place, but they had run like a fiber line right by his house to get somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, I'll get it. And he was like in the middle of nowhere, yet had like the fastest internet connection in the Western United States. So that lended some credibility to that theory. Now, as we
could well be,
we could well be. Let's see other things that we want to. Okay, Brantley Hooks, a graduate of Bucknell, South Carolina kid, so he's probably encountered a mudflap or two in his day. Best place in Iowa for flapjacks and or cold domestics. Well,
I'd say Dave and Walker's used to be a good joint in Iowa City, but I think they cleaned it up a little bit, which is unfortunate. There's some really nice places along the river in Waterloo, especially if you're looking for cheap beer. Just kind of follow the rivers, I would say. That was my recommendation.
As far as the lifetime, as you said, of the Kentucky Mudflap and your ability to do this as a wrestling fan, where do you see this going? And did you ever think that you would actually be continuing this character and talking about being the voice of Hawkeye Wrestling? You're like real family to me. Did you think you would be doing this for going on 15, 16, 17, 18 years?
I didn't really envision it as being a long-term pursuit. At some point, however, I realized the sport, as great a sport as it is, has a lot of variability in terms of quality. And I thought perhaps Mudflap might encourage certain people and certain programs to improve or look for alternatives that might be helpful. I love the sport, don't follow any other sports, and have found it to be so exciting, intricate, complex, and populated with such good people. I would hate to see it go by the wayside. And looking at it, and I know there are a lot of people out there who lament programs going away. But looking at it over the period of time that I've seen it, 45 years, pretty good sample. It seems to me like it's getting bigger and it's getting better every year. And I think our people, meaning you and I and everybody in the wrestling community, everybody who loves the sport or who's affiliated with it, needs to understand through our actions and behavior and our support of it that it's going to continue to grow and get better. And I think with that, I think it certainly will.
One thing about the unique style that you have is you don't seem to reply very often. It's you've got a post, and that's usually the end of your interaction until you follow up with maybe another throwback to a reply from another post. Is that something that you keep your interaction limited to prevent yourself from giving yourself away, or why that style?
I think it's important to express an opinion and put it out there for people in the wrestling community to take a look at, maybe hopefully find a little humor in. And I think it's also similarly important not to engage in that internet board kind of yelling at each other that I think is unpleasant, really doesn't serve a lot of purpose. So for that reason, Mudflap posts up. If people find it interesting, they can fight it out between them. He's certainly morally and ethically way above that kind of behavior.
When looking at this season and how the course of the action goes, you say you follow only wrestling, and where is your main source of explain a normal day for you as not as flat, but as the person you are. You wake up, you have your work, what you do, and then where does the wrestling news and the collection of wrestling news and information come from? Where do you seek that out?
Well, certainly I look at your media, and of course, thankfully, I got something from you every day. As I've remarked several times, you've assumed the mantle of leading in wrestling journalism, in my opinion. And I've likened you in many ways to Mike Chapman, who was an old friend of mine and really sparked a lot of interest with his work at the Cedar Rapids Gazette and the books that he wrote and had published. I also read The Mat, which I think is an excellent piece. I take a look at the campus newspapers for all the big programs. Because a lot of times the college newspapers will have good reporting that the other journalistic areas don't pick up. I'll look at things like the Iowa City Press Citizen, the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and of course, I'll look at the various boards, including Hawkeye Report. So try to keep abreast by looking at facts. Additionally, because of the growth of internet webcasts, it's easy to grab a lot of dual meets now. When in historic times, even 10 years ago, you'd have to travel to see any appreciable amount of wrestling during the year. So with the Big Ten to go and Flow Wrestling and some of the universities that are sponsoring webcasts, I'm able to continue to follow many matches. So yeah, like you, Jason, it's not I'm sure it wouldn't be unusual for me to watch 3 or 4 dual meets on a Saturday, or to pick them up on demand and look at them. It's gotten to be a lot easier to be able to get content and news and to make judgments about who's good out there and who's ready to take a fall.
What's been your favorite nickname for a Hawkeye wrestler that kind of took storm? It kind of took a name of its own. One that jumps out at me is McDonough, calling him McBono, and there have been other ones that have been out there. But which one really surprised you that the wrestling community and even Iowa Hawkeye Report fans kind of ran with?
I think Borat was my favorite. People seem to resonate with him.
Such a good one.
Yeah. There were some good names of guys, historically that did before the internet too, that were pretty interesting. There was a wrestler in the early 1980s at Iowa whose team nickname was Fleabag for obvious reasons, and I won't name who it was, but yeah, there have been some characters that have come through, haven't there?
Yeah, and one thing I know, Andy Hamilton and I are both kind of wondering the same thing. How many people actually know that you are the person behind the the handle of Kentucky Mudflap?
Fewer than 10 and more than 5.
And I've already said this, so if you people out there that have offered to pay me to tell you who people are. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to my grave with that type of stuff. So I'm not going to sell out anybody's forum handle that I know based on the information I had there or any spoof emails. So sorry, guys, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. It depends on the sizable check. What would Mudflap do in this situation? What is the sellout point? What am I legally allowed to accept in order to exchange the world for who your identity is?
Well, I think if somebody poured enough truth serum into you, that would be a get out of jail free card, don't you think?
No, because I've been going to Fargo for almost 20 years. You know how much truth serum I've drank in Fargo and not given up the goat? So it's going to take a little bit more than truth serum. I can tell you that.
That's the only way I can see you divulging that information.
All right. See, you actually understand me. Now, also, Andy also chiming in, how many people are actually real family to the Flap?
Well, I think everybody in the wrestling community is real family. They took him in when nobody else wanted him, right after he got out of the joint. So, yeah, that's real family for sure.
Now, as far as we kind of alluded to this earlier, how many illegitimate children does Flap actually have that you could probably say is a safe number?
He doesn't know for sure, but I'd say between 20 and 30 easily. His comment about visiting Stillwater and raising the IQ level down there, or enhancing the gene pool, was certainly not well received by the Oklahoma fans. But that's kind of an example of his kind of rustic humor.
Now, I'm not going to say the full name of the House of Ill Repute that he likes to use. I just know it rhymes with cabin. In what part of the state of Iowa is that? I've heard rumors that it's near Okoboji. I've also heard that it's in Grundy Center. Where's the location or the general vicinity of said cabin?
Kind of in that Devil's Triangle composed of Keokuk, Lone Tree, and Columbus Junction. Somewhere in there.
Anything else you would like to add about whether it is kayfabe or breaking kayfabe, if we want to use professional wrestling terms, about the person behind the Flap or the Flap's persona as a whole?
I just just loved watching wrestling and interacting with my fellow wrestling fans. Historically, thinking back over all these years and all the people I've met, I've never met anybody that I thought wouldn't help me out if I had a flat tire at the side of the road, or wouldn't have a kind word to say for the people around them. So I, really kind of more or less just want to thank everybody for hanging in there, being a wrestling fan, and supporting the sport and enjoying the things that I love, and I think everybody out there who's enthusiastic about the sport also loves.
Were you worried about doing this interview because now you've put a voice to some of the posts? Because when I read it, I sit there and I go back to, I think of some of the members of my family, maybe even my dad, with some of the ways that he can say certain words. I'm reading it and I just hear this style of voice in my head. Are you worried about maybe that kind of wearing off as people listen to this?
Well, I hope not. But if that happens to be the case, that's the way it is, and then we'll move on to somebody else or something else. Somehow I think, though, regardless, Mudflap kind of exists out there. He's going between bars and strip joints, discount liquor stores, and dog fights, and roofing jobs, and even if he may not really, be flesh and blood, he certainly there's a spirit of him around there, running around the countryside. So I think he'll endure.
There's a little bit of Flap in all of us, right?
I would say at some point or another, even if it was when we were really young, and even if it's something that we don't want to admit to right now, I think so.
Well, there you have it, folks. The voice of Hawkeye Wrestling. He's like real family to all of us with all that late breaking Hawkeye news. You can read Mr. Flap's posts at themat.com and the forums. So on behalf of Mr. Flap, thanks for joining us to give us some insight on the Flap and the man behind the Flap.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll see you. Hopefully, I'll see you at Big Tens, and it's not there or national, right?
Well, I won't be at Big Tens. I'll be announcing the NAIAs down in Des Moines, so I'll be actually closer to said domiciles and RVs. But actually, if you're going to be at the Big Tens, RV is going to be in East Lansing. So I'm sure our paths will cross, and if you see me, come say hello. I'll do my best to protect your identity as well.
I hope everybody has a really good day. So thank you very much.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. First time listening? Well, you can change that by going to matttalkonline.com/get-short-time to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or listen on your favorite podcatcher at matttalkonline.com/listen.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to matttalkonline.com.